This collab has needed to happen for a long time. It's good to see
Years
you.
in the making.
Yeah, years in the making. I mean, almost 2 years.
For real.
Has it only been 2 years?
Since Harry DM'd you.
There's been a lot of moving parts in this whole thing. Like, since then, we've lived at your house.
Slippery little seal slide into my DMs to start this whole thing off.
Yeah.
Or did AG slide in your DMs potentially? Or did you slide in his? Probably you slid in his, but.
I forget how it went. I mean, I think we were just starting to write and starting to get a little bit of traction. And you were working on a few different projects in, like, the world that we were talking mostly about, which is like fixing the food system, making some change in the food system. I think I just remember either I reached out to you and you hit me back, but you were like, you guys are doing great work, like, keep it up. And I was like, all right, like, sweet, something's working.
Yeah.
I was like a month in.
And then we broke steaks.
Yeah.
We broke
I guess
steaks
maybe
at Salt and Time.
Salt and Time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't break bread, we break steaks. And no, it's just cool. We were saying too, like, some of our best friendships and relationships have actually come from Twitter, honestly, of like, you know, DMing someone, feeling like someone has a similar philosophy to you, and then you actually make the next step and meet up with them in person. It's just amazing the relationships that you can get off a social media platform if you use it the right way.
I mean, I think that's the concept of do something online and then do it to take it in person is one that most people don't hold, but I think is where a lot of riches comes from.
Yeah.
And most people just get sucked into the online games. And even, like, honestly, business and making money, like, a lot of my thought on business now is how do I create engines that make money online that I push into local communities? And even you guys are like, let's make a network online, but then meet real people face to face.
Yeah.
Is a transition that I think leads to the opposite of where the rest of the culture is going.
Yeah.
Which is not really working. Just the same as, like, all the stuff around health it's not working. Food system's not working, and doing something different sort of needs to be done across the board.
Yeah. How many businesses have you started as of today throughout the entirety of your career?
When does the career start?
I guess
Because I was starting businesses
as a kid, right?
Yeah, when I was like a teenager.
Yeah. I guess
You gotta count those.
Yeah. I guess chiropractor practice up until now.
Probably at least 10.
10.
Yeah.
Which one do you feel the greatest sense of pride around, whether it's like the amount of work you put into it or the creative unlock that you had when you finished working on the project?
Pride's tough. I mean, I think that Perfect Keto I put the most amount of energy into and had the most amount of growth and lessons. And just looking back, I mean, it sucks because it's managed in a way I wouldn't want it to be managed currently. And it's on a very different trajectory than what I set it on. And going through that experience makes me sort of never want to sell a business again.
Really?
Easy to say after having sold a business.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's almost like I think about work projects very much as I am doing a creative outlet. And even that's how I optimize them now. Like, I don't really care about the outcome. Yes, I want to have impact and stuff like that. But if I focus them as creative endeavors, almost like a band making an album or like a painter painting something, and I'm developing new skills, like trying something else out that's new, and like I have this itch of something that needs to exist. Obviously, there's something that's also valuable that can be a real business. I think people tend to launch businesses that are just pie in the sky ideas that don't have foundational business sense behind them. But as long as I'm doing that, I'm sort of happy.
Yeah.
And to see so much work going into one of those things be sort of like desecrated to a sense.
Yeah.
Kind of a kick in the nuts.
Really?
Over and over and over again. And just had to chat with actually the team today, and again, just don't really agree with some of the decisions that are being made. Doesn't mean that they're right or wrong. It just is. I thought I would be able to detach fully from it after being done with it and have like sold the equity, and I did to a good degree. But it still like is sort of part of me in a weird way.
Yeah.
And so it's just like an interesting phase to go through that. But for sure, as far as less about pride of anything that I did, but just more so of the opportunity that I got to learn so much as I did.
Yeah.
I mean, we like hit a jackpot with the trend taking off when it did. And it forced about 40 years of business experience in 4 years. And there were a lot of ups and way more downs. Where like I looked back on it. I just actually hanging out with Justin this morning. We were chatting a lot about the nostalgic Perfect Keto times. And just like, I talk to people who are in business for 20 plus years and they don't have the amount of experience that we had, just because the trend went so fast. And we were basically the first brand to do anything in the keto space. And so we just like rode that wave of scale, and that just forced so much learning and mistakes and growth. Not only from me from a business perspective, but just like me as a human, that I am proud of how I responded to the challenges more than like I'm proud of the output of the business. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
What I was just curious to ask a question around like your style of business. Like when you're in that entrepreneur seat, what does your role look like? Like when you're in your creative genius or your entrepreneurial genius and doing the best work, like what does that look like?
Yeah, it's been an evolving process for sure, but I think that what's been clear to me is I really like product development. I really like branding.
Got a gift for that.
And just figuring out what actual problem a community has and how to solve it in a way that the business model actually works. So assessing like, can you price it at this point? Will people buy it with having enough margin to actually fund the business, to make the business to do the thing that you need to actually do to do it in a sufficient and sustainable way?
Yeah.
Which I think that itself, like I've gotten really into the weeds of like building business models now and just like modeling everything out to an obsessive degree and thinking about supply chain and input cost in what people pay for things and how they perceive value. And like, can you, with that, like have a supply chain that support, like for example, this new project that I'm working on. When is this going to go live, by the way?
We can
Mid-October.
adjust. Yeah, we can adjust if you need
like
us
talk
to.
about lineage, but that has been a treat for me to like build a supply chain from the ground up for the first time. That is like extremely fun for me. It's like solving a puzzle, but also a creative act in itself, but also doing the branding and being obsessed with, as a former fat kid, of like the sensory experience of consumable product to me, I think is like very fun to make something that's never existed before and make it better than anything that exists currently.
Yes.
And so those things, if I were to just be able to do that type of stuff over and over and over again, at least for right now, and like that may change, who knows, but taking something from 0 to 1 effectively is like what I've enjoyed the most. What would you say you guys have like, I see a very like, education's fun for me in a certain sense, but it seems like you guys really enjoy the educating part. Like how has that, like early on, you haven't gone through a lot of this stuff, getting reps for the first time, like where do you guys see yourself slotting in?
I was just gonna say, like I think my slot is like when I played baseball, my coach always said, like he always called me coach, and I think like for me, I love the idea of being able to create a movement around helping coach people through like what's gone wrong in the food system, how they can actually improve their health, not just from like, here's a piece of paper on the things you should eat, go do it. Like get into the psychology of like, this is why you should do it. Like, how are we going to help you build incentives and build momentum around it? So I think with everything we're doing, we're like trying to make it fun, trying to make it like approachable. Obviously like the name Meat Mafia is a little like abrasive, but I think when people get to meet us, they're like, oh, these guys are actually like fun to be around. They're trying to actually help people. They're hosting runs or hosting events. And I think that for me, that's where or at least my contribution to the Meat Mafia, I think, is like trying to build that like coaching voice around like getting people excited about being healthy.
Is that like leading a community, or how would you look at it?
Yeah, I would say, trying to like bring people together around health, because I feel like health can be so isolating. And like when people are struggling with it, they feel like all the negative emotions, like shame, guilt, like why do I feel this way? I just think like helping people overcome that through bringing people together and making everyone realize like, oh, you know, the people who are really good at this have been working on it for a long time and they have it mastered. It's like someone who's really good at coding or really good at starting businesses. They've done it a million times. It's a muscle. But like people are just starting, you know, it takes a lot of effort. So if you can surround yourself with the right people, it makes it so much more fun. So I think like my contribution is, and hopefully will continue to be, just like making it a movement and trying to get people excited about it.
Making
like the Meat Mafia in general. And then I think just like the Meat Mafia's contribution to connecting people with more regenerative farms and high quality food sources and giving people the information they need to actually like go out and start applying some of the principles that have helped both of us in our own ways be, get healthy.
Was the initial question just gifts as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, like where have you slotted
I
into
just take that totally the wrong
No,
way.
No, I
It
think
applies.
that from what I hear, it's coaching, starting a movement, which sort of like goes into what was my question of like, do you guys feel like you're uniquely qualified at doing educating, which is like is bundled into that?
Yeah, I think we have an interesting skill set because, you know, we kind of went from off the couch in corporate jobs to saying, look, you know, we have a passion for this stuff. We don't have MDs. We're not nutritionists. We're not chiropractors. But, you know, we've kind of put the 10,000 hours in from a diet and lifestyle perspective. And like, you know, I did heal my autoimmune disease holistically and things like that, which gave me credibility. But there was still a little bit of this imposter syndrome starting the podcast of like, are we really qualified to talk about these topics? And we kind of leaned into the power of, we don't necessarily need to be the expert. We could just be the enthusiast and seek relationships with guests and people that know far more about certain topics in depth than we do. And let's just like facilitate and really interview and not focus on ourselves, but just how do we pull the best morsels of information from the guests in a way that's going to benefit the audience the best way. I think that's really helped us a lot.
How do you guys think about this now that you've transitioned into launching a business on top of it? I mean, a few different business avenues, obviously, as in to make money. And that's like, I think that one of the most empowering things for creators to do that they should be doing. We've talked a lot about this around creators should own brands or they should own products, digital services, whatever. I don't really care.
Yeah.
But to be able to make money and not worry about money, to be able to double down on doing the creator stuff and putting out information is like the most obvious thing to me that needs to happen. And I think that people conflate that with, oh, you're just a shill trying to sell information, or like you just built this to make money.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like who's going to pay for your rent, bro?
Yeah,
100%.
Like we live in an economic world, so you need to make money, obviously. But I'm not saying that the only reason you guys made the business is to make money. But how have you thought about transitioning the focus on sort of like education, community, behavior change, et cetera, those skills? Like what have you learned from running a business now for, I don't know, what was it, like six, 8 months?
Yeah.
Like what new skills have you seen that you needed, and like how has that transition been?
Yeah, it's funny when you launch a product and you have these people, like there are a lot of people that are overwhelmingly supportive, and then there are a lot of people that like, what the fuck is this? Like, can't you just like eat a steak instead? And I'm like, you do realize that like for the first year of the Meat Mafia, we literally invested thousands of dollars into the podcast without making a single cent. Like we would fly across the country just for an interview because we were like, we could maybe get some information that would be really super helpful to our audience. I think what's interesting, the difference in our perspectives is like when you launch Perfect Keto, this almost like Logan Paul, Mr. Beast creator type model that then transitioned in the CPG space didn't really exist to the extent that it did today. So I think for us, you know, we started to see people really leaning into the show, and the two most common questions we would get were just like supplement recommendations or what's a great quality source or farm to be able to source meat from. And Harry and I just kind of had a whiteboarding session one day with our co-founder Colin, and I was like, well, if we were to look at the supplements or the foods that really helped us get in the best shape of our lives and heal my stomach, it was a combination of beef, grass-fed organs, you know, raw milk, colostrum, and then collagen through the source of bone broth. And we just said, look, could we maybe combine these things into like an all-in-one protein powder that could serve as a bridge product to a lot of people, where maybe you're not replacing organs or steak for this product, but like someone like my sister, I think, is a great example where she's never going to go eat raw organs on her own, but she should find like a delicious way to be able to get some of these things into her diet. So we were really trying to solve for like, does this ancestral angle actually have mass market appeal? And can we do it in a very thoughtful way? Not this like Liver King, like overly rustic approach where it's like you can still build a great business over that, but can we make it a little bit cleaner, like modern branding, like a little bit more inviting, and something where, you know, people of all shapes and sizes want to try this product, because like just getting more protein or more nutrients in your diet as opposed to going carnivore and making all these other changes, I think it's just a lot more sustainable and approachable for people too.
So how has the transition been as far as like skills development? What have you guys been interested in? Like what's it been like? It's that's what I learned. I mean, I wasn't even, I was posting a little bit of stuff when I launched Perfect Keto. Yeah. I was still in my clinic when I launched Equip. There was a lot of stuff that was going on for me, and it was hard, but man, it's just like a whole new life.
Yeah. We hadn't really gone deep on like the introspective stuff together in a very long time, like since we started Noble. And a few days ago, we did like a whiteboard session on just like, you know, where are we aligned? Like all of these just like simple questions that just pulled out all these like great answers. I really felt like we both grew through that session and are like still kind of processing it. I would say just like entrepreneurship is the game of figuring out what you're really, really good at and like what you are really, really deficient at. And you can kind of hide that in the corporate world, or you can just get plugged into the slot and just like do your thing over and over again. But when you're starting a business, you have to be like able to take on things that you're not necessarily good at and try to be as good as you possibly can until you like can either fund someone coming in and taking that role or develop the skills to actually be good at it. So just being aware, I think, is like aware enough to like know when you're just like a temporary plug-in for a certain role or task, or like this is gonna be a thing that you're owning for a long time. But I think like as we've grown, one of the things that I've appreciated is just the ability to like actually get real-time feedback on your efforts. I don't think I really got that as much in the corporate world, but like when you're actually working on a project with somebody else who's like is holding you responsible, you know, when you fuck up, there's immediate feedback on the business and immediate feedback on things that you're trying to build. And I just love that. It's like sports. It's like baseball. Like if you strike out, all right, you're back on the bench. Like, and you get 8 other people up in front of you going to take their at bats before you get another chance to go out there. So that like real time feedback to me has been like the best part about doing this. And I think I'm like still in the early innings of just like the growth that I'm experiencing. But I know like I've just come a long way in terms of really seeing where my strengths can actually be applied in the most valuable way going forward, which I think is fun because a lot of people don't even know what their gifts are, like what they're really, really good at.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know the product development, branding, any of that type of stuff when I was in my clinic.
Yeah. Yeah, you thought you were a great chiro.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I feel like oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, and trying a bunch of stuff makes me realize like that's the thing that lights me up the most right now. And I actually started thinking about this the other day I think that I'm going to go back at some point to doing in-person care. Not necessarily like I was doing before, completely different angle. We could talk about that at some point, but I know it's not right now. I just know like whatever it is right now, I'm just going to focus on that process right now.
Yeah.
And not try to do a trillion different things. How's it been for you?
Is that where do you feel like you've run into, because I think this is like the entrepreneur's problem is they like see so many opportunities and they like want to chase them all. And that's, I think we're definitely, I fall into that camp for sure, where I'm like, we could do this, we can do this, we can do this. It's like, you kind of got to pick.
Well, the issue with what you were saying before regarding you don't know what you're good at, typically the people who have success are the people who are good at everything. And when you're good at everything, it's really tough to say no to things. And it's not even like what being skill, like this central skill that most entrepreneurs have is being able to figure out how to get skills everywhere. So that's what you need to do. Like you're not going to thrive if you don't have that skill, if you can't figure out everything that needs to be figured out really fast. And so those people kind of filter through as being able to figure out, in my mind, not what can you do well. Yeah. You should be able to do everything well, in my opinion. It's about what are things you can do well that are also very fulfilling and fun and feel like to me, it's like something that needs to get out.
Yes.
Like a creative process. Like I have this thing in me and like needs to come out.
Yeah. There's like an imperative.
Yeah.
Like
I can like also like write copy really well, but like writing for me is not, I don't get that sense of like needing to process something and like get it out of me. Whereas like making these things and like solutions to like, I want this to exist, doesn't exist. Branding, like I have a vision typically in my head of what the thing is. And like it needs to come out of me. Yeah. And that I think is what applies across any like creative pursuit. Yeah. I think that's where I've at least been able to like craft a lot of my time and how I spend it in that zone. Instead of just like, and it's tricky to be able to do a lot of things, to know which ones you should be passing off. So I think that when people find the thing that is that creative process for them, and some people it is customer service, and some people it is spreadsheets and finance. Like I can do those things, but it doesn't feel like the same thing to me. And so I should offload those things instead of the classical business stuff is like when companies get larger, oh, you don't have these skills. You should, find your weaknesses and, offload those or whatever. And again, I just think like I've seen it with you guys as well. Like there aren't a lot of weaknesses. There are a lot of lack of skills because you haven't done anything. But once you start doing something, you figure it out immediately and you're like excellent. You're not going to do anything in the business and be bad at it.
Yeah.
Unless we like the only exception to that is like unless you try to do them all, which I think is
at the same time.
Yeah, and you're like, oh fuck, like now you're bad at all of them.
Yeah, I feel like it's, to answer your question, Anthony, like what it's taught me is you're actually having me have new revelations and new insights, because the stuff that lights me on fire is like since I was in college, like I love sales, like I love building relationships, I love how to figure out like how to add value to people. Like when I was in my like the first corporate sales job that I ever had when I was 23, like I used to love just going and meeting with new clients and just getting coffee with them and just talking to them and figure out, is there like one or two ways that I can maybe add value to this person? And I think that's partially why we've been able to grow the podcast really quickly, because I feel like maybe one of my gifts is just being able to build relationships with the right people and just find ways to add value to those people. But I've also found that that skill set is very applicable to Noble with like, investors or getting into retailers or connecting with the right affiliates or even just talking to customers or things like that. I think it's definitely allowed me to identify my weaknesses, where like your gift of being able to put together like this beautiful branding and packaging and design, like that's not my skill set, but it's like if I have a great concept, like just give me the rock and then I can kind of go out and kind of act on those gifts, so to speak. And it's also taught me too, like to your point, building a world-class team around you that can fill in those gaps so you can focus on those gifts in a way that you're going to be the most effective and also truly enjoy the work is so important too, because when I get away from that, that's when I start to feel that like fatigue at the end of the day where I want to just sit on the couch and literally watch Suits for 4 hours versus like when I'm spending my day doing those things, it's like I could do that literally all day, every day, because I love it. Yeah,
I'm curious to see how it will pan out for you guys after a couple of years in. Like if you want to focus on something in business rather than the podcast or social media or whatever, or like some kind of combination of all of those things.
Yeah.
You're not going to know until you get there, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. You made me think of something too. I feel like another one of your gifts is the speed that you operate as well. And what I mean by that is I remember I have a very vivid memory of when I lived in downtown San Diego. We had a call because we were thinking about doing a tallow business, and I was just trying to pick your brain to get some knowledge and insights. And I was like, how quick, like start to finish, do you think I could get this? Like we could get this company live? And you were like, it was a Friday, and you were like, Monday or Tuesday. And I was like, are you serious? And you're like, yeah. And even just the way, like, even if you were like to lay out how quickly, like you formulated Equip Foods, and then even you'll text us an idea that you're having, and then like 2 weeks later, like you'll send over like the Shopify with the branding dialed in and ready to go. And I feel like speed is definitely one of your gifts. And I'm curious if like that's a gift that you like recognize and associate with yourself, or maybe how you've developed that skill set, because it seems so valuable.
I think it's less a gift and more a curse of impatience.
Curse of impatience. I like that.
And I think any strength has an opposite weakness and vice versa. And I think I've just been lucky to turn a lot of the weaknesses in my life and try to use them more as strengths than as weaknesses. Because that same thing that like, I need this thing to go live right now also makes me furious when I'm in a line at a grocery store.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. Yes.
It's like, I just have that work. I used to be a very impatient person, and I learned how to craft that into speed of execution and production of things.
Got it.
Which also, like, even going back and forth between that polarity makes it not easy for me to be present. And so I've had to like balance that out and figure out, when do I use this thing as a tool instead of it drive me constantly?
Yeah.
What has it been like for you being an entrepreneur and then also starting the newsletter, the podcast, and starting to develop more of the media stuff? Because you started doing that a little bit after you'd entered the entrepreneurial world. Is that
so?
Correct, or?
I have clinics, and in my clinics, I started a website, and then started social media effectively to so the website was articles to not have to repeat myself to my patients about topics, Like one of the first ones I ever wrote was like why you should eat grass-fed beef. And this was like, I don't know, had it been 2012 or so, 2013. Because I was sick of taking up 35 minutes of patient hour, telling them what, like, and I was like, I'm going to write something, and then I like put it on a website so that way they could access it, and I sent them links. And then I realized people all around the world were reading it. And there's a thing called the internet, and I was like, holy shit, this is cool.
Yeah.
And then I started Instagram shortly after that and was doing like recipe stuff and whatever, because like that was just growing. I found it really interesting to like put out stuff on the internet. And I had this idea of, I was getting really burned out at patient care with having to be on site 6.5 days a week was my schedule, and do a service-based role, which was like, if I wasn't there, if I was burned out and took a couple months off, I wouldn't make any money. And to me, that was like a very fragile existence of like, this isn't secure. Like if something happens to me and I can't make money like this, and then I started selling stuff online, like digital programs. I think I sent you guys one.
I think you did. Yeah.
A couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you did.
Yeah. And I was like, holy shit. Like I made $14 last night when I was asleep. And that was then a motivation for me to sort of like start diverging away from my clinic to get some diversity for own income, which again, like I keep going back to the thing of having freedom of income to allow people to pursue whatever they want, while hopefully keeping the intention of like, there's something past the money, but figuring, like understanding that there's this blockade of finances and money that is a problem that we shouldn't have to fix. But because our society is set up in a certain way and we're like ripped out of the way we should be living as humans, we have this artificial layer of like needing security to like pay for rent, groceries, whatever with money, and being able to extract that from how you think about what you do in the world and have either like a business or a product line or whatever that you believe in, take care of that and know that like that can, I can do whatever I want with all of my time, and that can be still making that. And like, it's a form of security that I think allows people to like really dive in to figure out what's important to them. The unfortunate modeling that we have with some of those like Mr. Beast, Logan, Prime, all this bullshit is that they're just fucking doing it to make more money.
Yes.
And it pisses me off. Like this is the example that people are setting. I was having a conversation with a friend last night around dinner. I didn't listen to this episode. Apparently Mr. Beast was on Rogan, and Rogan asked like, hey, why don't you do like a cleaner chocolate bar? And his answer was apparently, again, I haven't listened to episodes, conjecture, from what I heard, what my assumption is. Could be completely wrong, but what I heard was because most people wouldn't buy it. And my friends were talking, they're like very big business, like scaled business kind of mentality. Well, if he made a clean chocolate bar, then like he couldn't be $1 billion business. I'm like, okay, so that assumption means that the goal was to make as much money off of middle America as possible. For what? Like what? Billions of dollars exit. Okay, then what happened? Then what? You start another fucking shitty chocolate brand and then or a drink brand or whatever. Like, what is the purpose of this? And for most of these creators, it's like build a massive audience for fame and attention. Now launch a makeup line or a drink line or a chocolate bar or whatever to make billions of dollars. Then what? And it's this constant path of just like reinforcing this individual ego of power and control and dominance that got us into the problem that we're at everywhere else. But I think that like where you need to start is the same point of build audience, launch brand or product to get freedom to do something that's actually meaningful and valuable. But most people like, they blast so far past what is enough. And I think enough is different for every person. No judgment on what that point is, but you gotta have the question of like, if I ask you like, what is enough for you? There's no like, I want to build $1 billion business and whatever. It's like, I had so many friends now who have like over the course of the last 10 years, being in San Francisco, being in Austin, and being networked in the entrepreneurial community, have huge 9-figure plus exits. Everyone's trying to find themselves and they don't. So then they just get back to work to try to make a bigger and bigger and bigger outcome of exit. And there's very few people who come to mind who break that mold. One of them is Taylor and Katie with Epic Acquisition, putting it into Rome and Force of Nature. And it's like been amazing to watch them. Like I was talking to Martha, my wife, earlier today around like meeting a bunch of people in Austin this week. I've been back after being in Bend for 6 months. I'm like, I don't have a lot of role models anymore.
Yeah.
I'm at a point in my career where I look around and so many people are playing a game for I don't fucking know what reason.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like sickening to me to just like have these conversations about let's partner with this person to launch this thing to do that. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Because it's like could be $1 billion company. Like, did you see this? Harry Styles launched this fingernail polish company and they're doing like a bit like whatever. And like this company like went from 20 to 200 in a year. And I was like, so what? Like what? Like, and I had a conversation with a friend last night who's like going on this path, but I asked him like, what's changed in the last 2 years? He's like, nothing. I'm trying to do this because I care about things like regenerative ag. And I think I have the skills to have a 9-figure exit. And then I'm going to roll all of that shit back into doing things that actually matter. And that's a distinction that very few people have. But you need to start at the same spot, which is like build the thing, make the business, but not get intoxicated by success when you have it, which I think has happened 98% of the people that I've known who have had it.
Yeah.
What do you think is different about Taylor and Katie where they realize like now like channel everything into something that actually matters after you have that type of success?
I think they have another similar thing, a curse that I have, which is like inability to stand for injustice to a certain degree. And there's some times when I wish I could just be like these other people. It seems like a way easier life day to day because there's like, you don't have to wrestle with, I mean, even when I'm building stuff, and I think it's like the best it can be, I wrestle with like, fuck, this packaging is plastic. And like, I don't feel good about that. And you have to make some compromises along the way. And I think like to see them, the conversations I have with them of like, they care so much about land and how we grow food and have a sense, especially Katie, of just like, the world cannot be like this. I cannot stand by and watch this happen.
Yes.
And that's kind of how I feel in a lot of ways of just like almost disgust with like the normalcy in which we're like destroying everything at the expense of what? I don't know.
Yeah.
Casey Means and I were chatting the other day. She's on my podcast. We're talking just about like, how the fuck did we get in this mess of overweight, chronic disease, like disconnection, blah, 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 blah. And it was like simplified in a way to me that makes the most amount of sense at this point, which is like the human obsession with comfort mixed with the human obsession with money. Those two things combine in a way that like kind of answer why we're in where we're at. And like you need to have like a pretty strong internal compass nowadays to fight against those two things.
Yeah.
And that's what like social media, all this business stuff, et cetera, like essentially is like the slipping into this weird obsession with money or comfort or both.
Yeah. Could you maybe talk about, as someone who's like had a very successful exit that people dream of, I'm sure it probably drives you crazy when you talk to new founders that are like, oh, you know, we want to get acquired in 2 to 3 years for this multiple. Like, what is the underbelly or the dark side of actually selling your business that you experienced?
I mean, the same thing I talked about with everybody else of everyone goes through it, has this sense of meaninglessness afterwards because they typically don't have a clear, like, then that means this. That's something that they've optimized for many years and have developed skills, habits, routines, identity. And then it all flies out the window once you have that liquidity event.
Yeah.
And then you have an infinite amount of optionality, which I think optionality is actually not great for humans. I think it leads to paralysis.
Yeah.
Optionality on where to live, optionality on who to be with for a partner, optionality on what to work on. Like these are the three biggest things that were effectively non-options before, which people like, you look at the past of our grandparents like, oh, like they didn't have any mobility. They couldn't move to whatever. Like, yeah, I also had culture and meaning and place and connection and like rituals and all of these things that I'm trying to rebuild in my life, you know? Yeah. And, yeah, I think it's like that I had to play, like, it wasn't as hard for me because I knew I wanted to learn about the farming stuff and I could like pretty much instantly parlayed it into that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's still an identity thing for me of like, do I go back to building businesses? How do I spend my time from day to day? Like, how am I most useful?
Yeah.
And it's when the objective is I want to make money to have financial independence, so that way I can figure out what to focus my time on. It's really easy, in my mind at least. Objective is so clear, and it's an externalized objective. Society places this function on you, which is you have to solve the money game, or else you're effectively going to suffer. I believe that to be true, at least. We have our whole economic system is set up on the carrot and the stick of making money, and like I just wanted to be done with that game as fast as possible. That was a lot of my optimization and my choices. That it's just then to have that as a very clear objective. Not a big deal. You don't have to decide that. Once you figure out you're in the matrix, and that's one way to get out of the matrix, it's easy to do. But then when you're out of it, how am I going to be of service? What are my skills? What am I like? What lights me up most right now? Like, do I have massive impact through education, or do I focus on people in Bend? Is it like, you know, the goal at the beginning of the year for me, especially like heading into trying to have kids, is let's create a portfolio of businesses of things that I believe in, take the cash flow, invest into local businesses and local community. Like, again, take the money from the internet, you know, make it in ways that I'm very aligned with, things that I want to exist, push it into local.
Thank you.
Push it into local things. And I'm like, there's a few different projects that I'm working with to do that right now, and like basically create this funnel.
Yeah.
Nice.
But is that how I should be spending my time? Like, there's always these questions that arise for me, and I think that's kind of the struggle that I'm going with right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, sometimes I wish I could just rewind the clock back to like have just like we used to operate in our entire human history of, I need to eat, I'm going to go do that. Like,
do that.
Yeah.
I need to protect myself and like be secure. Like, the external environment dictated what you do. And right now, like, that used to mean thriving in good times. And if you don't solve those problems, if you don't solve the money game, that's guaranteed suffering.
Yeah.
Because the external forces on you right now aren't natural ones, they're artificial ones.
Yeah.
They're government and society and culture that I think is decaying rapidly. And so you have a decaying system forcing external things on you. And if you follow that carrot, because that's what we're programmed to do, respond to our environment. What is our environment telling us to do? Right now, it's telling us to be miserable humans.
Yeah.
Working for the man, doing whatever.
Yeah.
And so when you escape that because we have to, because otherwise it's misery, then what's left, it's fucking hard.
Yeah.
Like, I don't wish that upon anybody, but that's the struggle. I mean, it's nothing that came up with talking to Martha today of like, I feel alone in that. Like, I don't feel like a lot of people, peers of mine, are going through that of like really trying to wrestle with how do I with most integrity approach life now, and how does that look from a day-to-day basis, while also like not making me a miserable, high ego, like playing the same game that I've seen everybody else sort of like be destroyed by. Like that again, no like real inspired people way ahead of me besides Taylor and Katie. Again, are like a great example of that kind of like bucked the curve.
Well, it seems like the playbook of building this portfolio of businesses where you make money online and you really believe in the products a lot, whether it's regenerative beef sticks, NAD patches, etc., and then investing in the local community seems like a pretty powerful mission that you'd be really good at too, I think.
Yeah, it's been good to some degree. I think that there's like, the more I get connected to what matters to me, the more inconvenient business gets. Just in the sense of like the plastic and the packaging, things like that. Like, I don't want to be putting all this into the environment. Yeah. But like, also living in my farm is clear to me, like just being a farmer and doing that and just providing food to people, to me, didn't feel like enough given my history of skills. Yeah. And so we've been looking into like, can we switch everything over to compostable packaging? Like, where can you do this? And it's like, it would 5x our packaging costs. Like, can we still run a business at that point? And like, does it make sense? Well, then we can't do this thing if we do that. And like, how are we gonna like? It's just this giant puzzle piece that we're always trying to figure out. But it's the longer you're alive thinking about these things, I think, is like the more you care about stuff like regenerative ag, sustainability, thinking about having kids and like what world they're gonna have. It's like just harder and harder and harder to make money for sure. But that was like this, again, the skill that I've built. And so that's like, that's tough to be like, do I pivot? Do I just be a farmer? Do I like, I think it's been a struggle to try to figure out that balance.
Yeah.
What do you think that next phase of life, like I mean, having kids is like a lot of people's ultimate purpose. You think that will give you a new, I mean, obviously we'll give you a new reframe, but what are you expecting?
I'm expecting everything to change.
Yeah.
And we're trying to set up our lives currently to allow complete freedom of that, in the sense of, I've seen a lot of friends go through the process of having an identity, and identity as a couple, especially, we do these things. This is what our life is. And then having a kid and expecting the kid to fit into that. And then them finally having to like relinquish to the fact that they're parents and that is a completely different reality.
Yeah.
And so I want to get through that phase and be as open and malleable as possible, understanding from everyone that I've talked to that once we have a kid, I mean, hopefully, I don't know, maybe Martha can't get pregnant, I have no idea, but assuming that we would, being open to the fact and just trying to be aware that my psychology, my values, priorities, what I care about, everything's going to change.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing that that's coming and setting up my life to have flexibility for that to come.
Yeah.
And so that's the expectation of like, everything will probably change.
Yeah.
And we'll just, I mean, everything in our life right now is like, let's just have a kid or 2 kids and then reevaluate everything after that, and not trying to like have an enormous change until then.
Yeah. I mean, what a gift, what a gift it will be to like have the financial freedom to be able to spend the time that you want to with your kids. Like that's amazing.
Yeah. But also like, what is that going to show them? Like, I don't want to set up a child in a world, like show them that, like, I don't think just hanging out is good enough.
Yeah, totally.
You know, I think like the system of the carrot and stick in society is actually really good, because it mostly, there's a lot of people who exploit it for sure, but it mostly forces people to be value add members of society. They need to make money. You make money mostly by providing value.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people who don't provide a lot of value, and there's a lot of people who are corrupt and exploit people to get the money and whatever. Like the system can be rigged. But you know, like how better a way, like I don't want to have my kids be like super stressed about money like I was until I was 27.
Yeah.
Like ultra stressed, like broke as hell. Getting out of grad school, living in San Francisco with basically $300K in debt, like doing everything in credit cards, not knowing how I'm going to buy food in a week or two. Like I don't want them to experience that, but I want them to also know the skills of like, you have to earn things for yourself. You have to contribute value to society. Like a whole system set up that you do that. And then you make, like, when you provide value to society, you make money from it mostly. You get a lot of haters on like Elon, for example. Guys providing some
significant,
definite value.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a lot of talking on my end.
It's good. It's good stuff.
Throw it back.
That's the benefit of a podcast. You just have these like revelations and insights and things like that too. That just comes from opening up on the mic and speaking. You know,
and also way better in person. Like it's
100%.
It's way more rare for this to happen on a Zoom call, which is like, again, like we talked about. I don't know if it was on the show or before, but it's challenging to be in, like, there's another trade-off of being somewhere like in Bend of there's not as many people like this to have a conversation with.
Yeah.
We're thinking in these ways.
Yeah. But I think the beautiful thing about that too is like, you know, you do things virtual, and you and Martha at the end of the day ultimately have the choice, where it's like, it sounds like Oregon is an amazing chapter and you both really felt called to be out there. But, you know, maybe there's a point down the road where you feel like you maybe need to be back in Austin, and you need to go to LA or somewhere else. And it's like, you do always have that choice too, which is a very empowering thing. But we forget about that sometimes for whatever reason.
It's a lot of work to move.
Yeah.
With, especially like after you get in the zone of like buying a house or a farm, do you guys know of that place? And then owning things and having a marriage and moving as a family unit and preparing to have kids. Like, it's just a whole other game.
Yeah.
Moving when I was young and single and like it was exciting. It was great. Had like to throw,
easy.
a couple things in the back of a Mazda and drive across the country and be totally fine with it. And things like, we moved essentially nothing, and I've been very discerning with any sort of thing we've purchased. But yeah, I mean, like the accumulation of possessions sucks. And if there's one thing that I could change about American culture, it's like there was a reversal of that, and like having less things. Lots of land, few possessions is still like a mantra of mine.
How long were you in Austin for before you moved?
6 years.
6 years.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
so what was the feeling like? You'd sold the houses, you'd sold all these possessions you'd accumulated for 6 years, and then it's like you and Martha are either, I don't know if you were in the car or you took a flight out to Oregon. Like, what was that feeling like of just kind of like being empty of all those things that you had for 6 years?
It's very liberating.
Yeah.
It was also a whirlwind, man. We were traveling around for 2 years trying to figure out where we wanted to live. So we knew that expansiveness that we wanted to have before having kids, that openness, like being to be impacted and just be like with ourselves and have a family and all that was not here.
Yeah.
Some people have kids here. It's great. No judgment. Just like wasn't for us. And we went to Bend in January of this year, and immediately it was this visceral knowing of this is home. And we had like a checklist before, and we were like figuring out like, where do we want to go? Does this match? Does it not? And there's just like a lot of learning for me to just, the more I lean into that gut feeling and the wisdom and intelligence that the rest of my body has besides my brain, whenever I've listened to that, it's always been a good decision. Whenever I've suppressed that, it's always been a bad decision.
Yeah.
We both had that immediately when we were there, and we like, after a couple of days, talked to each other about it. I'm like, oh shit, like we need to do it. And then at that point, like sat with it for another month or two, and then decided we wanted to sell our places in March, listed them in April, and within 3 weeks, both were sold, and then moved back and sold all of our possessions effectively within 1 week from both houses.
Wow.
And then moved. And so like, it just like, it was this thing that was going to happen for a couple of years, and then like all happened at once. And so it was like this hurricane of action. And then when we got there, we're like, what the hell did we just do?
Yeah.
It almost like
you
wasn't
just
even like,
described
it was,
like an actual like crazy amount of stuff all happening in like a 3-week period.
It was insane, man. When we were selling all our stuff here and from both of our spots, my thumbs, I thought, had permanent arthritis because I was like on Facebook Marketplace so much, and there were people coming like 19 times every hour of like, oh, this is a live auction effectively.
Oh my gosh.
And it was just a crazy world.
Like,
we didn't even see like any friends that week. It was just 6 straight days. And then we got there, and it was like we were running on adrenaline for, I think, months at that time. So it was tough. I mean, coming back now, it's about 6 months later for the first time.
Yeah.
Has been finally the point where like, oh, this is different. This feels different. Like it's been a good point of perspective for us to be able to assess what the hell happened, because it was such a whirlwind.
Well, it sounds like in the short period of time you've been back, it's already affirmed the fact that you both made the right decision too, which I'm sure feels amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
Because there's naturally that fear of like, well, I crushed it here for 6 years. We love being here. A lot of my friends are here. Like, did we make the wrong decision or not? But you coming back actually gave you that perspective too.
The week or two leading up to coming back, I had an immense amount of FOMO. I was looking at Zillow listings. I'm like, we're selling our spot in Bend. We're moving back to Austin. Like we fucked up. I already had all these plans, get an office space, and I got here, was like, oh no, this is just
all good.
Yeah, we're good. We're on the right path. Yeah, on the right path.
What are you trying to build in Bend? Because you had me thinking just in terms of this idea of endless optionality. Like I struggle with this because personally, like I'm from Virginia. Can't necessarily see myself going back there, but I want to be closer to family.
Yep.
So in my mind, there really aren't that many options. It's either I go where they are, or I build something in a place that is exciting enough to convince them to move here, or I can split time or something like that. But this idea of optionality, I think, paralyzes a lot of people and like creates a lot of like stress, like undue stress of like, oh my gosh, there's so many places where you can live. I want to live in the best place. There's all these factors. So I'm just curious, like with all of that, how are you thinking about building that future in Bend so you can truly enjoy it the way you want to? I know you've convinced a few people to move there too. So
yeah, we've already gotten some people on board, which is great. More people are moving by the day. It's like I'm almost kind of afraid it's gonna be like a. I'm kind of traumatized from having to Austin over the last 6 years.
Yeah,
it's been great for sure, but there was a certain magic that was here 6 years ago that was so incredible that just went out of control. And so I'm like, I hope that doesn't happen again. I hope it were like.
It can like.
Yeah.
Not be
so
too
Bend
crazy.
actually sucks, by the way.
It's terrible to not move there.
No, it's great. But I mean, not much different from what you guys are doing. Like there's this spot that we're trying to get under contract right now. That's a couple blocks from where I live. That's also a couple blocks from one of my really good friends who moved there. Like we intentionally got spots next to each other to have like kind of like a communal family vibe. Like getting people in the same neighborhoods who know each other, who are like obviously meet neighbors. Like everyone's been amazing, but building a community center there. So we're trying to do sort of like what Sapien Center has here, what you guys are thinking about, and doing sauna, cold plunge, gym, podcast studio like this, co-working, breath work, et cetera, like that type of thing going on there. Just a place, I think like having a physical spot where people can go and it's a container for personal, physical, spiritual, mental, emotional growth and support is such a thing that's missing in our society. And so many of the things that we had from religion, institutional religion actually still has, like they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
We kind of like threw the baby out the bathwater where they got out of control and didn't ask ourselves like, what's worth keeping here?
Yeah.
And having that spot where people come together over shared values to support connection, community, growth is something that doesn't exist there currently that I want to build. So just trying to figure out that. And it's the thing of like now though, like it's really hard, like it's really expensive there. Very few people. I could pull it off for sure here in Austin. 2+ million people, like cultural hub right now, like cutting edge, everything, everyone's here. But there, 80,000 people. I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to test like a landing page, see if we can get people to sign up. So if you're in Bend listening to this, hopefully there's like 4 people at least interested. Send me a DM on Instagram. It's probably the easiest way to get hold of me. Like I would love for you to be part of this type of thing. That's the thing. Even stuff is like the best restaurant in town that supports all these local farms. It's amazing. Just went up for sale. And I don't want to run a restaurant, but I also don't want the best conduit for local food to like go into the wrong hands. It's like I saw that this morning and immediately sent out a message to the people who are listing it for sale. And so I think that's been the case. There's a local food co-op that's been like kind of like rooted local where they do a lot of food distribution from local farms into the community, schools, hospitals, restaurants. They don't have like a direct to consumer type of thing yet. And so they're a nonprofit and I'm helping them with a bunch of stuff. And honestly, like just, I need to meet a bunch of people and figure out how people live there. Cause I'm not like we talked about before, like take some time when you're in a spot to like feel integrated.
Yeah.
And I think that as opportunities come up, I'll just see what I can do and how I can support, but it feels really good to look at things from a perspective less of need to make this impact online to like, how can I be of service in person? It's like a complete switch of perspective.
Totally.
Which is like kind of going from being clinician to doing that to online. It's now like a return to that in a kind of a different way. Yeah. So it's been fun to think about.
Yeah. It's interesting how you mentioned that a lot of like institutionalized churches and places have like cracked the code on in-person community, because that's one of the things that Harry and I see at our church thrive is that we'll have friends or we'll see people there that are still super, super early on in their spiritual journey. And maybe they literally don't even fully believe in God or Christ yet, but they keep coming back on Sundays because they feel so good being around the tribe of people that are at church. Like just for that aspect of community, they're like, I just feel really good when I'm here. I'm still learning. I don't know where I'm at in my journey, but I'm going to just keep showing up because I love being around all these like happy, energetic people.
How has this journey been for you guys? When we first met, I think you were kind of had some faith to some degree, but kind of were returning to it.
Yeah.
Am I reading that right?
Yeah, you definitely.
And like, what has been the impetus for wanting to restore that, and what does it look like?
I think it's a lot about what you're talking about, like seeing a lot of people who've like had a lot of success and still lack purpose and meaning, and like where do you place that attention? It happened like kind of, I guess the full story is like it happened pretty naturally in terms of us figuring, like tapping back into this, where we had a mentor of ours, Natasha, who we've had on our show. She's a triathlon coach in town, and Brett and I met her at the Waco Ironman, which is actually the reason both of us came down to Texas to begin with. And we met her at the race, and we talked to her for a little bit at the race, and then during the race she was following us, and we just like noticed this incredible person like showing an interest in us for no reason. She had 50 to like 100 athletes running the race, didn't need to follow us, didn't need to like make sure we were okay, but she lent us the time and attention. And afterwards we were like, we definitely need to like stay in touch with her. So we ended up going to a few of her runs, and after one of the runs she took us to a smoothie shop, and she was kind of at a critical point in her business where she had just had Nick Bear, who runs BPN Supplements, be coached under her, and she was really, really impactful on his whole Ironman prep and journey. And there was very well publicized on YouTube, all these videos of her being there, helping him swim, bike, run, get a lot better in that. And it was clear her business was like just about to explode. In the year that we've known her, it has. And even before that, she was having a ton of success, and we were like, how have you been so successful? And her response to us was like, she puts God at the center of every decision that she makes. And I think that was a little bit of a light bulb moment for both of us, where I know personally the prior 6 years working in corporate America, not like the idea of risk was so absolved from my life. And over the past 12 months, I've realized that risk is where you develop faith. Like that's where you actually start to understand like you need a belief in something other than yourself, or that you need to, but a belief in something higher than yourself gives you an ability to be in the moment when you should and could have anxieties about the future. So just staying the course and being in that moment, knowing that there is a path forward with uncertainty. And so her role in like all this was just incredibly impactful for both of us, and she got us thinking about it, and then ultimately got us to church. I started going first because he was in San Diego, and I was just very passive at first, sitting in the back, like solo on Sundays, sometimes with a girl I was dating at the time, and then just like kind of slowly just not really
soybean.
Yeah. Soybean girl. The one who left Cito. I was like, Gustin's place.
Yeah. He was not happy about that.
I was like, this is not going to be good. Yeah, we broke up a week later.
Smart man.
But the quality of church matters a lot too, to your point, right?
Yeah, like
so the church that we started going to is this church called Thrive, which is right off of South Lamar. There's literally 50 people that show up every Sunday.
It's in a dance studio.
It's in the back of a dance studio. But the pastor, Pastor Scott, he's just like an amazing guy that's really on fire for God. And you talk about a guy that's turned his life around. He was born and raised in Lubbock, Texas, was literally a crystal meth addict and selling and distributing drugs. So like Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad, that's how he describes himself in his early 20s. He was faced with a triple felony, somehow got linked up with a pastor. Pastor really helped him develop his relationship with God and Christ, and really helped him clean his life up, get sober, get his life together. He goes in for his hearing to get sentenced, and the judge says, look, man, you're doing amazing. Just keep doing what you're doing and drop the triple felony. And that for him was his moment of like, I would not be here without God, so therefore I'm going to devote my life to God, and then became a pastor after that. But I think for us, the biggest thing has been going to a church that's as small as Thrive, because you have such an intimate relationship with the pastor and the other people that go there. I think something that traditional religion gets wrong, because Harry was raised Episcopalian, I was raised Catholic. Were you Catholic growing up, or? Yeah. It's like it focuses so much on just like regiment and do this and repentance, and like it's honestly like a little bit boring. They don't make any room for the actual relationship with God, and they don't actually tell you that God really wants, he's like almost going after your heart, and he wants your heart, and he wants to build a relationship with you. So I think for us, like being able to build a relationship with our pastor and the community, and then break off and be part of these small groups and really dig deep in the scripture and the Bible, and realize that like a lot of the things that we're reading in the Bible, I'm like, these self-help books that I used to obsess over in college, I'm like, they're just taking the best principles of the Bible and they're like repackaging and selling them for money. So I think for us, it's just been a really great blueprint for how to live your life. And I think maybe a lot of the answers that we were looking for around like fulfillment or happiness or some of these other things, like I think that our diving into faith has really solved a lot of those issues too.
How has it looked different day-to-day basis besides going to the Thrive Church?
I think it's evolved. Like at first it was like going to church, and then on Tuesday I would do a small group, and it felt early on it was kind of just like I'm just doing this check the box type of thing. And then it was like, oh, I'm like showing up and like praying for people, like putting my hand on their shoulder and like praying over them, which is super awkward at first. But when you do like put your hand on someone and like give them a blessing of like give Brett the ability to see the things that he can't see and walk with the wise, like give him like an anointing and just like give him that energy. Like people don't hear encouragement like that. I think that was like a light bulb moment for me, where it's like actually being a part of something where you're positively connecting with someone in a way that's so detached from what you're talking about, like money. I'm not expecting anything in return from Brett when I pray over him. I just hope the best for him. And it's like, I think that is one of the things that was just like, wow, there's so much power in being a part of something that's outside of this world of just like transaction.
Well, there's so much about religion that we've thrown away, as well as just the ritual of practicing things with a certain reverence. And so when you're at church praying for somebody, this is like, write your 5 gratitudes in your bullet journal, like times 1,000.
It's like,
it's the same thing, but it actually means something, and it actually gets wired in your brain that way.
Yes.
There's, and a lot of it too, it's like when you get like the daily journal and you're doing your 5 things of gratitude for people, that's just existing on that piece of paper. Right. And there's a different element of belief when you're literally standing over someone, whether you're kind of faking it or not, like, and faking it as in like, I don't know what to say, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I don't have the right words here, what am I going to say to pray over this person? Whether you're literally just pulling words out of your ass, for lack of a better word, like, you're still doing it, and it's still a lot harder than just being the guy who's writing stuff down on paper. You're actually exposing your spirit to somebody else so they feel some level of connection. So there's just many like moments where I'm like, wow, I think just modern society has really done a really great job of marketing religion as like weird. And I think religion has probably done a really good job of like kind of, as it's turned into like mega churches and things like that, like almost marketing themselves as a little bit like weird and culty and not really like deep in the sense of like the spirit of what religion really is, which is like a relationship with a higher power. So I think being a part of this smaller church is so unique. Like that's where, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Like the smaller aspect of it is what's been the thing that's pulled a lot of the growth out of us.
Yeah, and I think something like my progression to a huge shift for me was like really starting my day off with God before I did anything else, like making that intention, like you guys were talking about, to really like get on my knees and pray, but not selfishly pray for myself, but pray for the people in my life that I'm grateful for and wanting them to be like filled with the Holy Spirit and God's love. And then also just honestly pray for the characteristics that I want God to instill in me. And then also like a great framework is just like, if I'm going to do something stupid, like actually like sitting there and being like, does God make me, like, would he want me to make this decision or not? So like, I think regardless of if you believe in God or not, it's like, that's still just a really helpful framework for anyone to have. And then I would say the way that things have progressed is like almost like this constant conversation with him throughout the day of just like, you know, asking him, hey, do you want me to do this? Like, should I be doing that? Or being grateful for certain things. It's almost like a back and forth conversation and just like an understanding and appreciation for, you know, what he's done for all of us and like a lot of the blessings that he's given to us too. It's kind of like that constant flow and that constant conversation throughout the day.
Is there an identification of what type of, is it Christianity?
Yeah, just like non-denominational Christian.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So like a good example of that is like me being Catholic, you being Catholic, Harry being Episcopalian. It's like you get baptized when you're young. We're in the non-denominational faith. What it says biblically is that when you're an adult, you should actually come to an age to make the conscious decision to get baptized. It shouldn't just be done onto you when you're a baby without conscious choice. So one of the big things for Harry and I is this year we just chose to get baptized by Scott. We just felt like we had made this investment in our faith, and we felt like this new fire and like this new passion, and we felt like it was the right decision to make. Yeah. So at first I was like, should I do this? Cause I've already gotten baptized, but I'm like, no, biblically it says that you should make this conscious decision when when you feel like you want to make that choice with God. So yeah.
I would just say, I feel like Brett and I are both still early on and just figuring out like even sometimes I feel like my understanding and relationship with God is like, I'm getting a really good sense of it. And then other times I feel like disconnected with it. But the more I like read scripture and try to like follow some of the lessons in the Bible, I feel like, and trust the lessons in the Bible, the closer I get to understanding like the presence of a higher power in my life and the decisions that I make through that, the benefits that they will have. It like cuts out all the like, manly or just like the modern world's like garbage. There's the stuff that isn't worth spending your time on.
Yeah.
So
have you guys talked about this much publicly?
We've been starting to more. So we interviewed Scott on the podcast in March. We interviewed Natasha a few weeks ago, and we've just been, what's interesting, right? And you see this, right? In like this regenerative movement, there are a lot of ranchers and people that are in the space that are Christian too. So sometimes it'll naturally come up on the podcast more, but I've been noticing like certain instances where maybe I would say nature or shy away from like saying God or something like that. I will say God publicly. So we've never like flat out done a podcast of like, hey, this has been our progression of faith. These are the things that have been helpful for us. But I've just been noticing when we're recording a show, like things will come out where I'll be like kind of publicly showing my faith and things like that.
This is probably the most we've talked about it for sure.
Yeah. I'm curious how people will respond to it. Like, or if you were to have write a Twitter thread, what the response would be. I maybe like even 5 or 7 years ago probably wouldn't have been mature enough to hear what you guys are saying.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's an interesting line here where the process that I went through was very much when I started figuring out that everybody who told me anything in life was a lie about nutrition, movement, like literally everything. Like most people who probably follow your stuff are very contrarian thinkers.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting that like I threw out Catholicism and religion as the thing that I was being told, but actually what's been going on, like the story that's being held by culture at large and seeing where the trend is going, is religion's just something we made to be comfortable with dying, and it's this hierarchy of control, and it's all bullshit, and there's no reason for it. It's sort of like materialist, science-backed everything. So I was actually like, I threw away the thing that actually had meaning because I thought that that was the top-down narrative, when really it was the materialist sense of there is no God, there is none of that type of stuff, which made me honestly like very atheist, nihilistic, depressed.
Totally.
For sure. I have figured out a lot of my own spirituality over the last 5-7 years for sure. And have been very Christian curious, I would say. And I wish that I could, it's almost like be chosen or like believe. And there still seems to me like to be a jump between like the concepts are there.
Yeah.
But the practices and still like some of the things and even the way of talking about it from me like doesn't click into the experiences that I've had.
Yeah.
Around even like how God is and interacting with like the personification of a deity per se is like kind of like, I understand it now, but like for me to practice that on a daily basis feels weird. Where I like have my own sort of practice, but that makes me feel very alone. And like I have to always, like you're talking about, even with the structure you have with this church, you trip up, lose it, have to re-find it. And having to do that on your own. Like Martha and I try to keep each other honest. We're pretty much on the same page.
Yeah.
Really, 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 really challenging to like hold your own spiritual truth without the hierarchy or the structure of an organized religion. And understanding that now, I go, oh,
yeah,
this is why this exists.
Yeah.
Not because we're trying to make sense of the fear of dying.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I think that spirituality is a precondition to being human. Like I think we've used enough of processing our senses in consciousness, and like we have the brain that can take all this information in.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been so many cultures that have arrived to this point out of, I think, exploration and figuring shit out, not of fear of what happens if you're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so it's been interesting to like come full circle on the belief of religion and seeing the whole thing of like throwing it all away. And maybe at some point I'll think that eating low fat processed foods is actually the way. Come around there too, but I don't know.
Well, it does make me wonder, like, if you are Christian curious, and you and Martha obviously want to be part of an amazing community out there, I'd be curious, you know, if you found a great church, just how would you, without any expectation, just walk in and go on a Sunday, and just how do you feel when you experience that?
There's a church that's half a mile from our house. It's like a Universalist. I don't know if you guys know about any of this.
No.
It's like they try to include every different type of religion, but still have structure around it. So anybody can come in believing whatever the hell they want, but there's a cohesion around getting people from all these different faiths together. It's really interesting.
Interesting.
And on my list to go. So this has spurred.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go Sunday.
Yeah. I would give you encouragement to, like, my feeling going, like, that first day just going and showing up, and it was a dance studio. I remember being like, am I in the right place?
That's awkward.
Why am I here? I'm like a 28, 29-year-old, like, single dude showing up to a church that's in a ballet studio. This is super weird. Yeah. I go in, I'm just like, whatever, just be here and experience it. And it was, at the very least, enlightening and let me see a new perspective. And then it's turned into a whole growth experience for me that's been much bigger than I could have imagined. So I think some of it is just testing it out and not letting the judgment of other people influence, like, oh, I'm going to start checking out churches again. It's like, yeah, it is a little bit like you have to really own, like, this. I'm going to see if this is going to be a part of my identity or not, you know, because for most people, religion is a big part of their identity. Yeah. Or it's not, and it still is a part of their identity, you know. Like, you being an atheist, you still had to still be like, yeah, I don't believe in that.
For sure. I think there's either religion or some sort of spirituality defined, or there's a spirituality or religion size whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's just the way it is. And like, it's a journey with anything else. I mean, talk about food and nutrition and all this type of stuff. And mine started when I realized what I put in my body mattered when I was like 14.
Mm-hmm.
And my journey with spirituality and religion started when I was 9 or 10, I think it was. My grandpa gave me like a children's Bible. And it was like the point where I was starting to like rebel from family, create my own identity. It's in my head quite a lot. And just reading through, like, these stories are bullshit.
Yeah.
And I was like, done.
Yeah.
Read through the whole thing a day. I'm like, this is all trash.
Yeah.
This did not happen. And as it took me many years to get to the point where I'm still changing even my own philosophy around nutrition. Mm-hmm. It's always changing, and like hunting in a couple of weeks, and I'm like trying to procure as much food as possible, and like eating only like really local seasonal food. Really, that took 20 years. Same thing with spirituality and religion. It's like it's taking probably longer to like metabolize and work through and find something that like is working. And I'm sure it will never like really be a arrival at some destination rather than just like a journey throughout life. But man, it's been a hell of a one for sure. It's one like I made up my mind in a certain way, very much, of like the atheism, and like switch from that because like it was too depressing, to more agnostic. Yeah, which I think is just like was for me at least. Again, like no judgment, people who come to these conclusions, but it was the easiest way. It's the easiest cognitive way to deal with what I was dealing with.
Yeah. I think that like the human interpretation of religion has rightfully turned a lot of people off of God. And then when you find a right church, right, it's like the right church, the pastor views them no higher than you. They're just like, I'm literally just a conduit to help you on your journey for faith. Yeah. And there's no hierarchy at all. And it's super welcoming and super inviting. And for me, when I was like more agnostic, even when we were starting the podcast, I'm like, well, it's like, if I have everything figured out, why are these Christian males that are coming on the show, why are they so much happier than I am? Yeah. Like, who am I if I'm not even that happy? So that was kind of what forced me to lead into. And I just went into it with no expectations, and it's been incredibly life-changing. And to your point, it's like, it sounds like you've had this huge progression in the last 5 to 7 years. So dude, who knows where you're going to be 5 years from now? We can't even predict it. But the open-mindedness is all that matters.
I think it's been interesting to see the evolution of psychedelic therapy, ceremonies, things like that. I think that there's an element of criticism that is well-deserved in the sense of it comes very much high priest shaman vibe, preying on vulnerable people, which I've seen a tremendous amount. Exists a lot in Austin. Even people who are like Western people who like get this superiority hierarchy over people. And I think you see that in religion a lot as well. I think that when people are ultra vulnerable and like really lost, there's a propensity for really lost people to take advantage of those people. Yeah. And you get two lost people who are like now playing this almost predator-prey situation. Yeah. And I think it's just happened in the psychedelic space because you get a lot of spiritual outcomes from that, I think, when you enter that space. And so a lot of people find that, and then they're like really vulnerable, don't know where to go in really fragile areas. And I think that, again, this is why the beginning of religion started out as like, hey, we need to have some structure around this. This is absurd. Like, people are getting taken advantage of. And then over time, it actually, that's what happened again. Yeah. It's really interesting.
What role do you guys think COVID has played in kind of unlocking? It seems like there's been this spiritual unlock where people are, I almost think of like trust as a water table, and it is now as low as possible in terms of trusting the government and trusting certain higher authorities when it comes to like big food companies and things like that. And now there does seem to be like people trying to figure out their own walk with faith, or just trying to understand their spirituality in their own way.
Probably people having to grapple with loneliness,
and
face it head on, for the first time in a while, not being isolated from people, and dealing with that and thinking like, is this it?
Yeah, it's like an existential crisis.
I hope not.
Yeah, I think it's given a lot of people just the opportunity to really like step back and take ownership of like the progression that they've been on with their life. I mean, even someone like you, it's like you're working a corporate job, you didn't really like the shape you were in or what you were doing, and you literally you're like, well, I have 2 hours back, so I'm going to start to exercise and really get my health under control. So you get your health under control, you lose weight, you feel good, you do a big race, then you have the confidence to quit your job and move to Austin and launch a business. It's like, I'm not saying that everyone is you, but I think it just gave people the opportunity to really like break the mold and break the routine and like pick their heads up out of the sand and figure out what's really going on.
Yeah. I think like at the end of the day, most people who even seek health stuff aren't really seeking health outcomes. I think what people are seeking is human wholeness. Yeah. Not human health. And missing physical health and vibrancy and mental, emotional health and even spiritual health are like indicators that like something's not right. Yeah. And there was just a lot of that, I think, that prompted in COVID. And it's just been interesting to see the response to that in a lot of ways. And I think people get really off track. Even stuff around obsession around like Oura Ring or like data, for example, like you get the Brian Johnsons of the world. Yeah. Where it's the like optimizing for longevity in like all these biomarkers and health and obsession over it without understanding like there's a much bigger picture here of like, what does it mean to be a human? Just interesting to like think about AI coming online, and like especially over the next couple of years. This is a book one of my friends had me read, The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleiman, who was the guy who made DeepMind. It was like the first AI company who did like beat the first person at chess, beat the AlphaGo.
AlphaGo.
And so like basically the book was like, we fucked up.
Really?
Yeah, we fucked up. It's over. What's now just not if or when this like basically replaces all human intelligence. And after we like stop identifying with intelligence as the primary thing that makes humans special, what's left? And I think that's hopefully will be like the bright side of AI, synthetic biology, even of what does it mean to be a human? And I think that that's been a lot of my, again, a curse that I flipped to a strength was just like a lot of existential angst when I was younger, or like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, this doesn't seem like something doesn't seem right. And it's been like trying to answer that question of like, something seems like it's missing. What's missing here? And finding stuff like regenerative ag, being integrated in nature, community, spirituality, like all of this stuff is so intertwined in this giant web of like what it means to be a human, that I hope because of COVID, because of trends, because institutions are falling apart, because AI is coming, like these things all just seem to be like leading people down a certain path of like rediscovering what it seems like we had for a really long time, which was a diversified representation of different people having wholeness. A bunch of different civilization types or like proto-civilizations, not even civilizations, just like tribes, different ways of living. There's not one idealized, I think like hunter-gatherer, Hod's tribe must be like that. I think it's humans very adaptable. But there was a framework of exhibiting this continuity of human wholeness, which I think is completely fucked now. I think that health is just approximation to like, it's one of the tiny slivers in that thing that people trip over getting in there. Some people get into it via spirituality or some of these other things, but it's just one of the many things into this question of when people are getting upset with governments or whatever. It's like, it's all the same question in my mind.
Yeah. I would love to get both of your guys' take and I'll chime in as well, but just like our shared mission, I think, between the three of us is what's happening in the world of Western health is just a terrible proxy for what it means to be healthy. And if we continue on that trajectory, more and more people are just going to get sick and be captured in what seems to be like a very toxic medical system that pretty much keeps you there. So with that said, we're all working on different projects to help move the needle in the health space. And we all have our different stories. We've talked about them on many podcasts, but what do you guys, like 20 years from now, what do you guys hope people are saying about like your contribution to helping fix the food system?
That's a good question. 20 years, what do we hope people say about our contributions? I don't know. I think that I hope that people would say that I help them just simplify topics that seem super complicated. Like, I feel like a lot of times we'll record a podcast and we could spend like 5 or 6 hours talking about the problems and the broken incentives and reasons why we're currently in like the metabolic health crisis that we're currently in. But it seems like it comes down to like a very simple set of decisions that almost everyone can make, whether it's like eating real foods, getting 10,000 steps a day, learning where you can actually find a local farmer. You know, I think these things are very simple, even though a lot of people don't have access to that information right now. And I think that that's something that we've really tried to do on the show, is just make these really complex topics simple for a lot of people and give people courage and be able to empower them that they have, you know, one of the few things that you do actually have control over in this very complex world is like the autonomy of the food that you choose to put into your body.
Motion.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would just hope that people, you know, get this sense of like just hope and simplicity around, you know, the decisions that it make when it comes to the food that they put in their body and the health that they can actually reclaim too. Yeah.
Hey, G.
Yeah. What comes to mind when you ask that question is actually a tangent from what we were talking about earlier of like shifting a lot of my priorities and how I view my own existence from what I'm doing to how I am, how I'm being. It's actually what like popped up for me was a lot of things that people would observe from like how I am and how I have been, let's say over the last 20 years or whatever. Things of like, he did what he thought was right. He stood up for me. He like worked tirelessly and like fought for injustice. Like, these are the things that I hope people say. And that's just like, honestly, has just been a different frame of how I've been thinking about things. Less of I accomplished this thing.
Right.
So I think at the end of the day, like, I mean, my current story around what I think the biggest problems are, and I think that I say that just because reality really is just a set of stories you convince yourself of at the end of the day. My current one is that even the stuff I'm talking about, human wholeness, everything, like we're in a path of, it's a pretty dire path of, I think, human existence. Maybe AI will play a part to solve some of these problems, but we need to eat to stay alive. And the way we're producing food to eat is by definition not sustainable. It's just like, when you look at the actual underlying principles and how are we alive as humans having this conversation and like exhibiting consciousness, we have to eat living things. We depend on living things, and there's a system of that. And the fragility of that system and the chance of it collapsing I think is much higher than the chance of it like continuing indefinitely with the way things are right now. So I also think that focusing on that and getting as many people involved in that, which is why I think even like sustainable agriculture doesn't work, because we're sustaining like basically a massive debt, which is not good. So why like the regenerative ag thing comes to me as like really important, because it's a way for us to bring back wisdom of how to maintain food. And then that also leads to a connectedness of nature, and like starts this cascade effect of what I think to be is the most easy way to get people back to human wholeness that you can. Connecting to the food they eat, where they get their food, nature, all this type of stuff. Being thoughtful about their place in things, their impact, their consumption versus whatever. And so if we were to flip to like what I don't know what that's going to be like in 5 years from now. Like, I think, I don't know, was it like 6 years ago? I was still in my clinic. Like, man, to think about like, I try never to project out that long personally, but I think something like I think that that's what is important. And so I think just something that is in that vein of supporting that. I think about it like almost we're in the Titanic, we've struck the iceberg, and I want to build some life rafts. I think that the best way to build a life raft is by providing people with skills and like reducing barriers for adoption of regenerative agriculture and having those systems be more widespread. And I think there's a lot of different ways to do that in our modern society. I think education is one. I mean, I think that even I've had tons of ideas after farming, even at a very small scale, around like equipment leases, training stuff, access to land, like labor markets. There's like so many things. Like things I'm thinking about in Bend, rooted local, like all these things. Even when I'm working on with lineage, it's like, how do I create tons of different ways where we can like have more resiliency in spreading the word about regenerative agriculture? Like that's why I care about it deeply. So just to give some context on like what, I don't know if that's a really good answer, but
no, I think the life raft analogy is like spot on, where if 88% of people are metabolically unhealthy and you're living within the confines of that system, it's going to only get worse and worse from the care perspective, the food perspective. And yeah, it's like, if you want your kids to be healthy, you almost have to work outside of the existing system.
You do something different. I mean, what's interesting about you asking this question, I'm curious for your answer in a second, but when Zach and I went to hang out with Wendell Berry, I asked him pretty much the same question. I said, what are you most hopeful for our generation? He said that the crash doesn't come all at once. Oh, damn.
Man.
That is not... I mean, this cat's been like thinking about this stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's like all of the people that I admire, do I think that they're all wrong? No.
Yeah.
Who would some of those people be? So you're saying a lot of people that you admire are calling for something big to happen.
Just saying that like we're basically cooked.
Yeah.
We need to focus on this stuff as fast as possible, but there's not really any like righting the ship in my mind.
Yeah.
We hit the iceberg.
Yeah. Definitely.
And I think once you accept that, it's a challenging spot to be in, because it's very grim.
Yeah.
And like, how do you maintain faith and hope and happiness when you hold that belief? And there's a lot of techno utopias used to be in San Francisco, and a lot of them are in Austin, thinking about like, well, we're so close to living forever. It doesn't solve any of our fucking problems.
Yeah.
We're so close to living forever, but look at the rates of destruction of ecosystems and species going extinct, and the quality of our water and air, and obesity and diabetes and chronic disease. Like, you want all of that stuff to continue going because you're living forever? Like, it just makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, tangent. What's your answer?
Well, kind of riffing off what you were just saying, like I kind of observed that I think something big will happen in the next like 10 years, 10, 15 years, that like I'm hopeful that what we're doing and what I can do is like give people a sense of personal autonomy and faith in themselves to be able to right the ship and actually create change and like convey that faith into somebody else, whether it's like starting a business so that they can support their local communities and provide for people, or, you know, they are able to start a family and raise them in a way that's like admirable and outside of the existing system. Like that's what I want to do. I want to like in the next 5 years start a family and like distill values that can like create resiliency. And I just think where the existing system is going is like very, very dark and scary. And I hope that the next 20 years is me just like building a pocket of people that I trust and love and care for, who are also just like able to provide for other people. And I think in the context of what I'm doing, it's like food is the center of all of our salvation and ability to keep going. So if we can create really high quality food at the local level, like that in itself will create like an umbrella for Austin or, you know, wherever it is. But I'm just like very, very of the thinking that like we don't need to solve all the world's problems. We just need to solve like Austin's problems. So there's people literally 5 blocks away who are homeless right now. Like, let's solve that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think 20 years from now, I just hope people like understand that they can do something. It doesn't need to be for, you know, all the things that they see online. It can be like, I admire the person more who's going and doing the little things like helping the homeless more than the people who are starting the big businesses, because they're walking with people who are suffering the most and trying to do good at like a very basic level.
Yeah, the infection of the idea that we need to solve our problems via scale is just, I believe, to be so wrong. It's literally the exact reason why we're here in the first place.
Definitely. So it's like,
Say,
yeah, we can outsource everything and solve, like it's basically what we're living between right now is like the idea of one world government and the opposite of that. Like governments all over doing their own thing. So like global food system is generally, I think, a bad idea. It's obviously solved some problems, but it's created a ton.
you guys had the Bitcoin bug a little while ago. Is that still part of the food revolution for you guys?
I think you were still, I mean, you were more bullish on it than I am.
Yeah, for me, I think it's the reason why the food system's broken to begin with. Money can be captured in ways that create backwards incentives in the food system, like corn, soy, and wheat being grown and subsidized, and the government can print money out of thin air just to support that system of supporting these subsidies. So,
but they can still do the subsidies without printing money.
Yeah, but in some ways, like the inflationary nature of the dollar, just them not having any sort of check and balance on asset allocation, like to infinity, they can just continue to devalue the dollar and put money in places that doesn't make any sense for it to be.
I think they could also do that if everything was on a CBDC.
Oh, I think, yeah, CBDC.
Or even on
like
Bitcoin, like you can still spend money poorly, hoard it, have terrible capitalist incentives,
right,
try to extract maximally from people.
But the fact that there's only 21 million in existence makes it so that it can't, you will bear the repercussions of that at some point.
You'd hope.
Yeah.
I don't see it, but just curious. I just didn't know where you guys had landed.
You had Safe on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Did he do anything for you or no?
As far as convincing me of it being part of the food system?
Did it change your perspective at all or not really?
I think the monetary system we have is fucked for sure, and I think that it needs to go a certain way. But I don't think that it's the reason why, or I think it's also the solution for the problems we have. I think it can be a tool like anything else, and we're gonna need to create. It's like, again, Titanic struck. We need to get life rafts. I think that there's also another thing of like creating adjacent scaffolding or like other ships. And I think some people are creating off ramps and some people are creating like separate adjacent parallel structures. And those are good things. Yeah. And I think Bitcoin's one of those things. I think cryptocurrencies at large are like one of those things to like get us off and create different scaffolding. But it's like the intimacy in which it's conflated in as the source of, I think it goes deeper than money. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question. So you were saying earlier that people's endless pursuit of money is like a very hollow existence, and is a source of a lot of like unfulfillment in life in general, and just like this waste essentially, right? Like they're earning it so much money that like, yeah, they don't even know what to do with it at the end of the day. So if you had money that actually preserved its value and grew over time, and you could save your time and energy in something that wasn't, it was a bearer asset that grew in value over time, and it could be preserved and not deflated away. Like, I think there's like so many positive things that come from that.
I don't think it stops people wanting to make money.
Yeah.
And I think it would create, there's scarcity around it. Like one of the downsides actually is it creates more competitiveness. And that would look even worse than where we're at right now, which it seems like there's infinite amount for everybody, kind of like growth of GDP, all this type of stuff. When you fix that and people still have that insatiable desire, I think that it's even more cutthroat than it is now. I could be totally wrong. I'm not an economist, but
yeah,
that's just my read on like thinking about human nature for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
Are we titling this episode "We've Hit the Iceberg"?
Yeah, entrepreneurship,
God,
religion, we hit the iceberg.
I mean, we've been going at it for like an hour, 40 minutes. It's a good combo.
Good
man.
epi.
Yeah, dude, it's great seeing you as always,
Likewise.
brother. Thank you so much for doing this.
Same.
We appreciate it.
Talk to you soon.